In order to respect the beliefs of our guest, we have only included permitted sounds within the laws of his religion.
In today's episode, we are featuring Omar Ali. His journey in life is a motivational tale with roots from growing up in Africa to moving to America. Omar has encountered events that has left him stranded spiritually and mentally. After the loss of a loved one, Omar's life took a dark turn where he journeys into the void. Through his undeniable faith in God and his intention for a better life, he emerged out of his darkness and continues to build. Omar is now a participating member at his local mosque, where he strives to use his story to inspire the youth of tomorrow. Omar, welcome to the show. Can you tell us where your story begins?
I remember before coming to the States, we were in Kenya, in Africa, in a town called Mombasa. And my dad, no matter where we were in the world, he always made sure that we were close, like walking distance to the masjid. So I remember in Kenya, we would have Islamic school in the morning time, and then lunchtime, go home for an hour, eat lunch, be with family, and then go back to school again, Arabic school. And I remember that my dad put he laid the foundation down for all four siblings. I have 2 brothers, it's 3 boys and 1 girl. And I'm the second oldest. Growing up in Kenya, I remember I'd want to play with my friends like after Islamic school, but my dad would push me to stay in the masjid. And I got into the habit of making the adhan, which is calling people to prayer. So when you are responsible for that, you need to be at the masjid 5 times a day, like for all 5 prayers on time. My father put a lot of expectation on me, and then he was getting the community and his friends telling him, like, make sure you pay attention to this kid. He has great potential.
How old were you when you were making the adhan for the mosque?
I was 7, 8 years old.
How did you feel with that acceptance? Did it make you feel good being accepted by your father because he knew you had all this responsibility, especially in an Islamic community at the age of 8?
Whatever our parents said, we do. Like, especially my father, he taught us really well to just don't ask questions, and we followed that pretty much, even though I personally would want to ask, like, hey, why can you explain this to me? Why are you telling us to do this? I want to know what's the reason behind it. But it's always been like, no, I'm your father, I'm your elders, you listen to your elders, you do as they tell you. That's it. You don't ask questions. And I was young. At that point, I didn't know much other than just respect your elders, and your father, at the end of the day, your father will be happy. And this is a big responsibility he's putting on you. So you have to succeed in this.
So you mentioned that this is sort of the foundation that you had set of a relationship with your dad. What was your relationship like with your mom?
The relationship with my mom, honestly, I don't remember that much, other than she was very loving, like, especially towards the parents, like both parents. We've never seen them yell at each other. Like, one thing I love and will always respect my father for is how he took care of my mom. Like, he taught us really well how to respect and take care of women. One time, one of the family members, I don't remember if it was my dad's side or my mom's side, was coming over for lunch, and we were preparing a feast. And that's the only time that I remember true happiness, meaning that all of us were sitting, contributing to preparing the food. I said something, or my dad said something, and it happened to be funny. Everyone just started laughing. And then I looked to the kitchen to look at my mom, and I'll never forget the smile and how happy she looked just laughing. And that was the last time that I remember, like, my mom being happy, because after that, I believe that's when her sickness started, was in Kenya. She was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it started then, and then from there, it just, you can kind of see my dad's personality or my father's attitude change big time. It's just focusing on putting a roof over our head, making sure that the kids are eating, and then also on top of that, making sure that his wife is getting the care she needs with like chemo, with driving. I remember he would drive 2 hours from where we were to take her to the hospital so she can go get her treatment. So I have very, very small, good memories with my mom, but most of them just seeing her in pain, constant pain. And it's been very tough. I would say the last 9-10 years of her life were just pure suffering. Just her constantly asking Allah, please, if it's my turn, just take me. I don't want my kids to see me this way. So it's watching that, growing up and seeing my mom going through that has definitely, and not only for myself, but for my siblings too, that kind of like really act differently towards each other. Like we weren't close. Like everyone was just kind of like to themselves and trying to find themselves or do whatever they can to help our mom as much as we can.
How old were you when she was diagnosed with breast cancer?
So I had no idea. All I remember was being in the masjid the whole time because of what responsibility my dad put me through. But the whole time I was going through that phase, my mom was already sick. Wow. But my dad didn't say anything. I mean, I can understand now that I'm grown. So we've never had a conversation. She got diagnosed in Kenya and I was about 7 or 8 years old. But at this time, I had no idea she was. And she went through chemotherapy and they removed one of her breasts while in Kenya. Her health just started to deteriorate and there wasn't good medical assistance in Kenya. So family members were telling my dad, hey, why don't you just take your kids and your wife to America? So we came and then same thing. Her health just kept deteriorating and then she lost her second breast. And it was, after that, it's just pretty much the way I saw it. I feel like she was like a lab rat. Oh, man. Every time, because I remember taking her to her chemo. I've watched my mom go from a beautiful, healthy woman, seeing her how beautiful she was, and then slowly just watching her body deteriorate, literally, meaning her hair was falling off. And then her hands just started to balloon. And then like just going through every day, watching her like slowly just decaying was very, very, very hard because she was kind of the glue of our family.
So you mentioned that your relationship with your father was a bit rocky, and your mom was deteriorating over time. At what point or how old were you when she actually did pass, and how did you handle the grief?
I remember before she passed here in the US in 2007. But before she passed, we were still somewhat attached, even though we're trying to find ourselves. My dad, like even coming to the States, I remember when we came to America, we first went to Utah, and the town we were living in, it was a lot of Mormons, and we were the only Muslim family there. So my dad coming to America, like not knowing much English, or none, I should say, it was very difficult. But at the same time, he had his friends and we had family here in San Diego. So I believe we were only there for 6 months in Salt Lake City, Utah. And it was very cold. So my mom couldn't really handle the cold with her being sick. And so my dad decided to move us to San Diego. And when we moved to San Diego, we moved into a community where it's a lot of Somalis. I spoke no Somali. This kid, brand new at a community, but it was a good, like, Muslim community. Like, everyone was willing to help each other out more than when we were in Utah. We didn't really have much. So my father felt more comfortable here. And then we were living in a 2-bedroom apartment right above the masjid. So my dad continued his pushing from when we were in Kenya, how I was making the adhan and praying all the time. So he still pushed that on me. And then right away, I started doing the same thing here. I would call out for adhan. And I remember the community mothers would be like, oh my God, look at this kid. He's only this old. I wish my kids were doing this. Like, they were looking up on us. They were always telling my parents, like, wow, man, you guys are very blessed with your kids. We wish our kids were going the same footsteps as your kids. So I feel like that even like made my dad put more pressure on me. So I was focusing on that. And then on top of that, he put us into public school. We would go to public school in the morning. And then as soon as we get out of public school, we would go home, eat lunch, and then go to Arabic school. So it was a pretty long day.
Wow.
And it was just like away from seeing my mom, just constantly sick. And it was kind of as occupied. Once we went to public school, I kind of started to learn English, like Somali. I started picking up the languages. My curiosity got to me and I started asking questions like, hey, why can't we do this? Or Dad, when I ask you a question, you always tell me, don't ask, just do as I say. So then I started to kind of like get curious about things and I wanted to experience life. So I always would joke to my mom and tell her to make her laugh when because she was, and I mean it, like when I say she was in constant pain, to make her laugh, I would be like, Mom, I can't wait till I turn 18, man. I'm going to get out of here and get my own apartment. She'd be like, oh man, the look on her face. She's like, what are you talking about? You're going to stay with us until you're in your mid 40s, your 50s. And then my dad kind of started to notice the path I was going. Like from those jokes, even though I was joking, he took it seriously. So he started to like pay close attention to me. And he would say, hey, if you're going to do these things that you're talking about, have the respect. Don't do it under my roof.
Do you feel though, like when he would say that to you, did that make you want to leave home even more?
Well, actually, yes. So at that time, no, because again, we had a lot of respect for the parents and I didn't think of like, no, dude, I want to get out of here. But the time later, and I'll get to it, I did get those thoughts and it did happen. Just throughout going through public school, I started to kind of make friends and like I started learning things and I was young. I was curious. Like I wanted to try things out. Through middle school, I was good. And then high school, I remember I started to kind of like just kind of do my thing. Like I was still praying, but I wasn't praying 5 times a day at the masjid. I kept myself busy. I would tell my dad, I'm busy. I have school, I have this, but I wasn't focused on my religion the way he wanted me. And I kind of noticed that he gave me a little bit of a leeway. Like he wasn't as strict as he was in Kenya or when we first came to the state.
Why do you think he did that? Why did he give you this extra space to be you?
Because when he came here, he was working a lot. And then when he gets off work, he would come home and take care of my mom. My mom could not cook. So he would come home and cook for the kids. So he was more focused on just living and making sure my mom's comfortable.
Right.
So he wasn't as strict as before. But he was, don't get me wrong, he was still pushing. He would always remind me like, hey, please, do stick with your prayers. Always, my father would tell me, stick with your prayers. No matter what you do, pray, pray, pray. It will always help you. So I think towards the end of my mom's life, kind of focused all his attention to my mom.
So on the topic of your mom, do you mind walking us through the last moments of her life?
We would always hear this verse. It's كل نفس ذائقة الموت. Every soul shall taste death. growing up when I was in Kenya, like at 8 years old, 7 years old, our parents would force us to go to the grave site and watch the body getting buried. And they would tell us, reminder, like, hey, look, this is where you guys are going to end up. You need to be prepared. You need to be ready. I need like good, make sure you stay on the right path. And then that verse really, really, really hit me when my mom passed away. And for all the time she was suffering, Allah decided to take her soul during the holy month of Ramadan. So Ramadan is when we fast for 30 days from sunrise to sunset. And anyone that passes through that month, it's a blessing. Every day she would say, please Allah, take me. Like, I'm suffering. Please, if it's my time, take me. Allah has preserved her. He could have took her soul any time before Ramadan, but he kept her till Ramadan, the holy month. And that's when my mom passed away. It was at like 2:33 in the morning. We would wake up to eat. It's called the pre-dawn meal, suhoor. We would eat to fill up our bellies to last us through the day when we're fasting. So we would eat and drink before the morning prayer. We were all sitting on the floor eating, and then my mom was laying down on her bed. We had a bed downstairs. She could not walk up the stairs, so we made a bed in the dining room. You can just hear my mom moaning. She couldn't really talk. I was like, okay, she's just in pain. But it didn't hit me that, hey, this is it. She's leaving.
These are her final moments.
And time I would turn my head to look at my mom, my dad and my uncle would like slap me and say, hey, turn back, look at your food, eat your food, don't look. To tell you, at that time, I was 18, 19 years old. So I was not a kid. So until this day, it really, really gets me like, why couldn't my father and my uncle let me just go say goodbye to my mom? Like, I always think, what was my mom thinking? What was her last thoughts? Like, was she trying to say, hey, let me say goodbye to my kids? Or she couldn't talk, or like, I couldn't even look at her. So that verse, كل نفس ذائقة الموت, really, really, really like hit me then. I was like, wow, my mom is gone. And that's when I knew, like, okay, I think this is it. All I remember was I got up. I didn't even wash my hands. I just ran straight to my room. Before that, I've never cried in my life. But I went to my room and I was like, you're good, man. You're good. Like, it's okay. You're fine. And then I kind of laid on my bed and I was looking at the ceiling, and then I couldn't hold it in. I just started bawling. I was like, wow, every soul shall taste death. That is absolutely true. Like, yes, my mom is gone. She's no longer here. That's it. I didn't even get to say goodbye. Seeing that and witnessing that, that was the moment that I said, okay, khalas. In Arabic, khalas means that's it. This is done. I'm done. I'm going to do whatever I want. I told my dad, I promise you that I wouldn't disrespect you under your roof. I'm out. Like, literally, as soon as we buried my mom, I got out of the house. I just started. I got an apartment somewhere, and then just started doing what I had intended to do, pretty much live my life, because I felt like the whole time I was with my father, it was either living his dream, and then watching my mom just deteriorate, watching my mom feeling sick, being sick. It was never days where she's happy or she's feeling okay. It was just constant visits to the ER, constant visits to her chemo, constant visits to this. And then just watching her, like when we go to her appointments, they would prick on her, like take samples constantly. It just, everything was brought back to me that night when I was in bed, and I saw everything. And then I was like, okay, finally, you know what? The one person that you loved and you really respected and you didn't want to hurt their feelings is no longer here. What are you going to do? And that was the moment that I had two choices: to keep following what my father wanted me to do, or go the other way and kind of start my own life.
the concept of death, when you said it resonated with you, did it resonate in a negative or a positive way?
I like that question.
That's a really great question, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say kind of in a negative way. It really affected me at it as like, tomorrow is never promised. So live to the fullest. But that took me to a really, really, really dark place. My dad would always tell me, hey, if you're going to do this, make sure you can get yourself out of it. Don't expect me to bail you out. Don't expect me to give you a handout or like be there for you. No, I'm not going to be there. If you choose to do this, you're on your own. So when he gave me that freedom and said, you know what, you do what you got to do, but just don't expect anything from me. I went and then I started, before my mom passed, I've never smoked a cigarette. I've never drank. And I wasn't eating haram, which is pork. Like I wasn't putting anything in my body other than pure, because in Islam, I mean, we try our best to keep the body pure, keep it pure as you can, as you came into this world. And then when you leave as pure as you came in.
Body, soul, and mind, right? Can you describe to them what haram means?
It pretty much means staying away from what's forbidden for us from Allah. So if your example is drinking is haram, because when we drink, it alters our minds. We can't function. So we cannot stand in front of Allah and pray while drunk, while intoxicated, because we're not ourselves. Anything that will take you, kind of separate you away from Allah, will take you towards haram.
I was born Muslim, my family, I was raised in a Muslim household. The one thing I remember growing up was my relationship with haram things. And I remember once I got exposed to something haram, I felt this guilt. And it was just like, it felt uncomfortable for me. And I'm sure when you were going astray, there were some things that brought you to haram, situations. How did that relationship between what is haram and what isn't start to fade?
So there was a point where I was eating haram. I was eating carnitas. I was eating bacon. Like any haram I didn't care about. I was eating, I was drinking, I was smoking weed, cigarettes. I drinking alcohol, popping pills, like everything you can think of, I've done. And it started small. So it started with just cigarettes. Right. And then from cigarettes, it went to weed 1 time, 2 times. At first, like going back to what, referencing what Joseph said, same thing here. At first, the first time I tried it, I felt this guilt, like, oh man, what are you doing, Omar? Like, and then that verse came back. It kept playing in my mind, like, kullu nafsin da'iqatul maut, kullu nafsin da'iqatul maut. Every soul shall taste death. And then I would think like, dude, you know what's waiting for you when you die. You're going to go to the grave. There's going to be punishment waiting for you. Why are you doing this? Like the first few times I would get that guilt. I've pretty much done everything that was haram. I've gotten tattoos. I said, you know what? Everything that's haram, I'm going to do it. And then from the beginning, the guilt was tremendous. As I started to dive in more and more and more into eating pork and not like even worrying or caring, and then getting tattoos and drinking, it started to become a habit. Right. It started to get easier and easier for me, because then I was doing it regularly. And then the fear was starting to go away, because yes, in the back of my head, I was still thinking about, okay, death will come to you no matter what. But then it started to become like, I'll deal with death when death comes. But right now, tomorrow is not promised. So I will live today as it's my last day.
So was there another side of your internal dialogue where you were justifying your actions using your mom's death?
It was kind of, how can I say, like numbing me pretty much. Like after going through the death of my mom, and then my father just completely cutting me off. Like after the death of my mom, my dad straight up just say, hey, don't come around. I don't want anything to do with you. And I was still his son. So I would try, even though he would say that, I would still here and there show up to my dad's, give my salam, like, hey, how are you doing? But I remember every time I would walk in the house, I would say salam, and he wouldn't even look at me. He wouldn't acknowledge there every time. But I still kept my duty and just kept doing that. Dealing with that, and then also at the same time dealing with the fact that I lost my mom. I couldn't say goodbye to her. Like I could have at least talked to her and try to understand a few things before she left. My only gateway, my only kind of like, okay, I'm feeling good right now, was towards drinking and numbing my body pretty much. Like to the point where I just didn't want to feel anything. Like every time I would drink or pop a pill, for the moment, I felt good. Like I felt like my worries weren't there. I felt like, you know what, shit happens, you know, just deal with it. It's fine. Like deal with it. Just suck it up, be a man. Like, but at least you feel good right now. And then as soon as that wears off, is back to thinking about like what's going on in my life, like reality pretty much. Like, oh, hey, your mom's still gone, by the way. And you don't have a relationship. You don't have a father and son relationship that you've been wanting. So then I turned back, like, okay, I don't want this high to go away. I want to keep it up. I remember I would take it to the level where I would drink so much that I would black out. And it was the only way to go. Every day it was just like, okay, here's another day. It felt like purgatory for me. There were days where I felt like I was alive physically, but then my soul was not here. I feel like my soul was taken somewhere else. It was definitely not here. I was moving, I was working, I was doing this physically. My body was here, but mentally, emotionally, I was so gone.
So as you were spiraling down, what ended up becoming your biggest vice?
I think the biggest thing was alcohol. That was the number one thing that I would just, it was my best friend. I mean, like popping pills and then doing mushrooms and acid and whatnot. It was like when the friends are around and peer pressure. I wasn't really big into that. It was more like the alcohol. I felt like I was still here. I went to the point where I was drinking so much to like, I can still function, but then I'm feeling good. Like I feel the buzz.
Would you say that that was your rock bottom?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. That was definitely my rock bottom.
After the loss of your mom and as you were spiraling down, did you ever feel like you were losing your faith?
We don't leave our faith in Islam. You do not leave the fold of Islam unless you commit shirk. And shirk is pretty much associating Allah with other deities, meaning that making partners for Allah. There's only one God, and it's Allah. No mother, no sister, no brother, no part, nothing. So that's always been there. Going back to the beginning, like I said, my father's laid a very, very strict foundation. So that's always been there. But going to like practicing my religion, praying, reading Quran, fasting Ramadan. Like I remember the first time I didn't fast Ramadan, I was like, dude, what are you doing, man? You're going way too far away from your religion. Now you're missing Ramadan. That's like a no-no. And then slowly it just became like, it's just another Ramadan. It's just another Ramadan, or it's just another prayer. And then I tried yoga. I tried to find happiness and peace through yoga. I went to a Buddhist temple. I went to a Krishna temple. I've tried different avenues to find peace. But where I went, it just pushed me farther and farther and farther and farther away from my religion. Until one day, I remember I was at my brother's house and we were talking, and I said, man, religion is just a way to scare us, like, you know, to keep us in check. When I said that, and then I left and I was driving home and I was like, whoa. So it got to the point where I didn't commit shirk, like leaving the fold, like associating God with other deities, but I was going towards that direction. Like, and alhamdulillah, I felt like Allah's rahmah, Allah's mercy has always been there for me. I've had suicidal thoughts. I've thought like, damn, dude, like after everything you're going through, what if it just ends? Like what, like all this pain can just go away. Like you don't have to worry about this. And then I started thinking about like, do you think people will like remember you, will think about you, will they miss you? Like I had those thoughts. In the Quran, وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًّا فَهَدَى, have I not found you gone astray, lost, and have I not brought you back? And I was so far gone.
Right.
I was going so far away from my religion, but then yet Allah was still there for me. He still did not give up on me.
That's beautiful.
He still, everything I've done like that goes completely against the religion. He still was there for me.
So when you were hearing these voices in your head, when did you start, listening to them? When did you start making goals or, actions to reach that goal?
I tried multiple times, actually, to stop. The drinking was the most difficult because going back to me being selfish, I've been with my wife for 12 years, and I'm very, 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 alhamdulillah, grateful that she's been with me through all this. She is an amazing human being, not just a wife, not just a best friend, but just a human being as an individual. She's literally been through everything with me. She's seen me at my lowest, like at the bottom. All she would always ask for me is like, please just stop. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting your family. You're hurting the people you love. And I would just say, yeah, okay, I'll stop. But then I just kept repeating and repeating and repeating the same thing. And it got to the point where she got tired and she told me, you know what? You keep doing this, one day I'm going to leave you. And it just didn't hit me. I was like, no, she's not going to do that. Like, she's been with you for too long. Like, I just kept dragging her down, putting her through so much. One day I came home and she was gone. She left. And that's when it hit me. I was like, oh man, she wasn't kidding. Like, I really need to change. She was the only person that like was my backbone, like my help. She was helping me through everything. I've taken advantage of her. I've lied to her. I have done a lot to her. And for her to stick along with me for that long, it's a blessing in itself. When she left, she told me, if you really love me and you mean it, you'll let me go and let me be happy. And that's when I kind of had to like stop being selfish. I said, you know what? Just focus on yourself, work on yourself, and just let her be. You know the kind of person she is. She's not going to go and she doesn't want to go and be with other people. You've heard her to the point where she just needs room to breathe.
Right.
So just give her some room and you focus on yourself. You try to clean yourself and do what you can do to better yourself. And she has definitely been a tremendous help, like a push for me to be the better version of Omar, like to show her that, hey, I can do it because I've given you many empty promises. I can do it. And I've always thought of like, man, it would really burn me if I come out of this and then she's not there to see the good side, to see the happy days. It would always burn me. And then it did. I think we were apart for 5 months, 6 months. So I just focused on myself. I started to just work on myself and try to stop.
How long did it take you to actually like get off it? Was it like a going cold turkey, you stopped overnight, or was it a slow process?
I tried to go cold turkey, but then it didn't happen. Allah has decreed for us that there's a verse, "Man yahdiyallahu fala mudilla lah, wa man yudlil fala hadiya lah." The one that Allah guides, no one can misguide at all. And the one that Allah misguides, no one can guide. So I feel like even though I was trying so hard, like I was trying to stop to show my wife that I can do it. Like I wasn't, the yaqeen, the sincerity wasn't there.
It reminds me a lot of the word intention. I know that there is a popular hadith or sayings that mentions the word intention.
Yes, the hadith, referring back to hadith, it's called إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلٍّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. So Allah sees the pure intentions. So if your intentions are pure, and this is towards anything, if you have pure intentions, it will work to your best. But if you just say it and you don't mean it, it will not happen. Then I just said, no, you're going to do this for yourself. You're going to stop drinking. Allah, please help me. And then from there, I went cold turkey with drinking. Cold turkey. I didn't drink 1 a day, 2 a week. No, I said, I'll stop. That's it. That was the last of alcohol. I stopped. I turned into training, but I was still smoking cigarettes. I was still smoking weed. But alcohol and the pills and whatnot, it was easy for me to drop. They weren't helping me at all. But the alcohol was the hardest. And then the cigarettes also, because I became very addictive to cigarettes and weed. I got into my training, and then I started to notice I got into running. And when I first started running, I would try to run 2 miles. Within the 2 miles, I would take breaks. I would get tired. I would drink water. But I started to do it religiously. My diet changed tremendously. Oh man, I can do this. So I did 2 miles, no breaks, no water. And then I went up to 4 miles. I was drinking water. I was taking breaks. I would push myself. And then when I jumped into the 4 miles and I was doing no water, no break, then I said, I need to stop smoking cigarette. Right. And that's when I stopped cigarette. When I stopped smoking cigarettes, I went up to 6 miles. I was breaks, water. But then I started to notice my breathing was a lot different when I stopped smoking cigarettes. And then 6 miles, no breaks, no water. I went up to 8 miles. Same thing. 10 miles, 12 miles. And then it became a routine to where I'm running, I zone out. And then during those times, and I was doing this for like a year, 2 years straight, just religiously, routine, no procrastination. My diet has changed. I stopped drinking. I stopped smoking, but I was still smoking weed. Weed was the last thing. And I was like, man, this is the one thing that's going to like drag on me. It's going to be the hardest thing for me to stop is weed.
It sounds like you had a wonderful recovery. I want to know, what happened to your faith?
One day I was running, and I think it was like 6 miles in. I started feeling this warm sensation, my whole body. My hair started to like stand. And I was like, subhanAllah, what is this feeling like? And then right away I get into my head and I'm like, okay, Omar, you've been clean for 2 years. You haven't been putting anything in your system. Like you're not drinking, you're not smoking, you're not eating haram, you're pure, you're clean and pure as you can get. What's the reason that you can't stand in front of Allah and pray 1 prayer a day? That is that verse I was saying, Man yahdiyallahu fala mudilla lah, wa man yudlil fala hadiya lah. Allah guides. Whoever Allah guides, no one can misguide. And for Allah misguides, no one can guide. For years and years and years and years, this was the number one thing that split my father and I apart, was fighting and butting heads. Pray, I don't have time, Dad. I don't feel like I'm clean. Like I was given excuses, like if I'm drinking, if I'm smoking weed, like I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to stand in front of Allah with all this intoxicants in my body. That moment is when I said, this is definitely a sign from Allah. Like, this is not just a random thing. I'm not going to make any promises. Please help me with just one salat, one prayer a day. Forget the 5, just one prayer. But again, going back to the hadith with the intentions, pure sincerity. I'm not doing this for anyone. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I don't care what people say. I don't care people if they believe me or not. If they say, oh, this guy's just putting a show or this. This is truly for you and only you. After that, I get home. I make ghusl, we call it. We shower and cleanse our body. To where after that, it's just been nothing but happiness and content. I was finally at peace. For 13 years, I've been asleep.
Right.
And then finally, after that day, I woke up and I just was and still am very grateful to been given a second chance.
It's like liberation.
Perfect. I felt liberated. I was saying, man, this is truly purgatory. I'm feeling this way every day. And then finally, all that, it's all the weight on my shoulder has been taken away. All this time that I was going through that, my mom was always in the back of my head, man, your mom is probably not resting in her grave because of what you're doing. Finally, ever since that moment, I feel physically felt it, wow, my mom is finally at peace. So like you said, Janica, it's truly a liberation for me. I feel so content. If someone were to tell me, hey, I'll give you a blank check, write as much as you want on this check for your contentment, I wouldn't give it up. That's how, this happiness I have. I don't need, how can I say,
it's not quantifiable.
Yes, of course.
Almost. It's you can't put a number or measurement to it.
Yes, I have my life to live here in this world while I'm here, to raise my son, to make sure that I teach him things, and then also my wife to be a good husband and take care of her, because now she's went from seeing who I was, what I was doing then, and then to stopping all that, and then who I am today.
Omar, thank you for sharing your journey and being a source of inspiration. Your story has touched our hearts.
If you enjoyed the episode and would like to help support the show, please follow or subscribe. Also, we would love to hear from you. Please give us feedback by rating and reviewing on any of our different platforms listed in the description.
We'd like to recognize our guests who are vulnerable and courageous enough to share their life experiences with the rest of the world. We appreciate your perspective. Thank you for showing us we are human. We would like to give a special thanks to our producer, videographer, sound engineer, and everything else in between, Joe Mills. The show would be nothing without you. I'm Joseph.
And I'm Jenica.
And we are Multispective.